Welcome back to another episode of Laps Around Dalaran.
Yes, it's been a little while. We say this quite a lot at the beginning of Laps Around Dalaran, but hopefully things have settled down a little bit now because, of course, we've finished progressing through Nighthold Mythic.
And what an instance, man. I mean, it's a long-ass instance. I don't think anyone was anticipating it to be as difficult as it actually was, and of course, we'll talk about that a lot in today's episode.
Yeah.
But as for the Mythic guides, we've had a lot of people tweeting out. I think there was even a Reddit post saying, is Fat Boss dead? We are not dead, don't worry.
Yeah, the way that we've usually done our Mythic guides in the past is that we've completed the tier. This worked very well for things like Emerald Nightmare, where you completed it within like 3 days or whatever. And same with even Trial of Valor, because we can complete that relatively quickly. But Nighthold, because it's been quite a mammoth instance, we've kind of seen a bit of an error, sort of, in our ways and how we can improve it. So next time we're planning on making it so the Mythic guides kind of come out as we're progressing through Mythic. That's something that we're going to be working on actively, but at least for now, the Mythic guides, we've got a ton of footage, we've killed the bosses multiple times, so hopefully we can make some really good guides for you guys, and they'll be coming out over the next week or two.
Yeah.
Trying to get them out really rapid fire, so the people that, wherever you're stuck in the instance, hopefully we can help you out.
And on top of that, of course, 7.2 PTR has come out, and there's a lot of changes coming on that.
Yes, it's crazy.
A lot of good, well, I don't know if necessarily they're good. There's a lot of interesting fucking changes coming our way regarding artifact power, 5-mans, legendaries. And of course, we'll cover that in some episode. We probably won't talk about that today. However, of course, raid testing has come up, and there's also a 5-man dungeon that's been released. We'll be covering both of those. We've done the testing for all the bosses minus 2 of them, but they're being retested at a later point anyway. So all of that normal fat boss shit that you've known over the years is coming back over the next few weeks or so.
Yeah.
So look forward to all of that. But let's get into today's episode, and let's talk about Nighthold. Let's talk about everything.
So yeah, big congratulations to Exhaustus for getting world first. I know it's a bit late, but still, I really didn't see it coming. Not because Exhaustus is a bad guild or anything. Of course, they're a very, very good guild, evidently. But it's just that Serenity was ahead for quite a few of the
it looked like Serenity
bosses.
I don't know if they necessarily had it in the bag, but they were racking up world first kills all over the place. They were the first to kill Botanist, which I guess isn't... I mean, obviously, it's still an achievement, but it's not a particularly difficult boss.
Yeah, quite a few.
But Star Augur, crazy hard boss, and Serenity did exceptionally well in that fight. The same with Elisande. They seemed to wrap that up pretty quickly. And it looked like it was probably in Serenity's bag. They were the first 2 Gul'dan, and they were, I think they had an extra day's progression. I could be wrong. I need to look at the dates. Either way, they were there before Exhaustus, so Serenity had the advantage. But I think where Exhaustus probably took them, I could be talking out my arse here, but at least from how it looks, is probably in phase 3. Because the last phase in Mythic is obviously, it's the secret phase. This is where you're fighting Illidan. Spoilers. Oh, it's not even a spoiler now. It's where you're fighting Illidan, and none of the spells, none of the strats, nothing is in the dungeon journal. There's nothing to help you whatsoever. So the only advantage you could get really was just through the data mine spells that you could find on your favorite fan site like Wowhead or something like that, which helps, but it doesn't tell you shit. It doesn't tell you timers. It doesn't help at all. So they had to completely do that phase blind.
Yeah.
And it takes a good 10 minutes to even get to that phase. So, there is so much work involved in like progressing through that phase if you have no idea. If you have a video, it's fucking easy in comparison.
Yeah, it's still like a relatively tough phase. It's mainly tough, as you said, because it takes 10 minutes to get there, and I'm sure we'll talk about the boss a little bit more later on. But like the fact of just getting there and not knowing at all what the hell is going on, you haven't had any testing. I'm sure it was a little bit buggy because, of course, it wasn't tested outright. It was only internally tested and nobody had any idea what was going on. It must have been a bit of a mess. But yeah, big congratulations to pretty much any of the guilds that killed it without a video, any external help.
It's just Exhaustus. Obviously, we're just better than Serenity in that last hurdle. So.
Yeah, they must have just had a stronger idea or just had like a strat that worked straight away or something along those lines. So yeah, big props
regardless,
to them.
Serenity obviously picked up world second.
Yep.
And then a couple of days after, I think it was Method world third. And then we had From Scratch world fourth, and then Limit just racking in that the US first and world fifth. So, it's been an interesting race, and of course, there's been lots of controversy.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of bits of drama. Oh, God, I remember this stuff.
Let's talk about it, right? So let's start off with the Serenity lockout being stolen.
Yeah, so apparently, what happened is that a person went up to a member of the raid team in Serenity, and it was just like, oh, I really want to help you guys out and trade you some flasks or whatever, and they invited them to a group, so he could trade the flasks. But instead, he immediately went in Nighthold. And because of the way Mythic lockouts work, it's not like a flexible thing like, heroic or normal mode. You can only ever have 20 people in that lockout at any given time. So when, of course, Serenity wanted to go in there to raid, they can only put 19 people inside because there's just that one random person just hiding out in the instance.
And what is interesting about it is that that one random person was from Method.
Yes,
I should point out it's a social member. It wasn't a raider, but regardless, was from Method.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of screenshots which look a bit sketchy to say the least. A lot of people say
I think almost every screenshot that's been released is probably being shopped in one way or another. They don't look that legitimate, but it was funny nonetheless.
Yeah.
Always entertaining, but it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
The fact that even happened. I mean, I'm pretty damn sure Method, like the actual raid team and the officer team and the leadership behind it, I don't think any of them would ever want that to happen because it's just not sportsmanlike. Obviously, there's this beef between the two guilds that probably isn't actually as much of a beef as people think it is.
Yeah.
It's just obviously the community's inflated it just because why not? It makes everything more fun and interesting and dramatic. But yeah, I don't think the guild was.
I can't really imagine SCO just scheming away with the officer team. It's just like, on this day we will put this social in their raid, and I don't think that happened.
No, I don't think so.
Well, the thing is, Method didn't particularly have it plain sailing either. They had a bunch of server issues. I say a bunch. It was for a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I think it was early on in Mythic progression. I think it was the first week. Tara Mill was just getting hit by fucking server instability.
Yeah.
Especially the instant servers. And there is a theory behind this that it's a fact that on Botanist.
Yeah.
As you get hit by the parasites, if you all just stack up and you just let the parasites keep spawning, and you can spawn hundreds of them, the servers start to crash.
Yeah,
that is
they
fact.
Are not
you can
happy.
do this. I don't know if you can do this on live servers now, and I really recommend that you don't, because you will literally get fucking banned for it if they find out. But there were people that were doing it.
Yeah, I remember watching Quinn's stream when he was first in there with like a viewer run. And he went in there, and the whole server just melted when they got to Botanist, because, of course, they accidentally spawned a bunch of ads as it was wiping.
So there's a theory that there were guilds out there that had malicious intent to crash the instant servers just to fuck over Method.
Yeah, so, there's so much of this, crazy scheming shit, which I'm pretty sure didn't happen because I'm sure they would rather spend their time trying to increase, do better and form strategies and make weak auras and think of compositions rather than go, how can we fuck over the other people? I'm pretty sure that's very low on the priority list, even if it's there at all.
Another thing that was really interesting about the race was the random world 4th kill of Star Augur.
Oh, by Fusion.
By Fusion. So Fusion at the time, I can't remember their exact rank, but I don't think they were in the top 20. I think if they were barely in it. They were 18th or something like that.
Yeah.
But they picked up the random world 4th Star Augur kill. Mm-hmm. And everyone was scratching their heads what the fuck? Where did this, how did this happen? And then they released their kill video. And it was so beautiful. So what they did is that in the last phase, the ad, which is a debuff on a player, when it expires, the ad spawns, they made a monk receive that debuff, and then he teleported out of the room.
Yeah, Transcendence.
Yeah, he uses Transcendence out of the room. People were saying they were doing it with Hearthstone,
which is, I could have
imagined. They just get the debuff and then Hearthstone out, but no, they were in fact using Transcendence, spawning the ads outside the room. And when they're outside the room, they just stand there and do nothing.
Yeah.
Which means you can just continue to nuke the boss, which makes the entire last phase trivial. And fucking brilliant.
It is funny.
It is hilarious. Their kill video is got stupid music to it. They just don't give a fuck.
Yeah, and the description is just incoming 8 days of Overwatch. They obviously it's of course bad to exploit and try and get ahead in terms of, the overall race and everything, but it's still fucking funny when a guild does it and then just says, look, we did this, isn't this funny? And that's kind of what they did.
And they knew they would get banned, and they got banned, and they didn't care.
Yeah, so props to them, honestly.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Well done, Fusion. But apart from that, there wasn't actually too many other things. There was this little thing with Prestige Gaming allegedly purchasing a player from Exorcist, and Exorcist sort of they didn't buy it from Exorcist. They just paid the player from Exorcist to leave and join them, and essentially just leak all the strats, the weak auras, and everything.
Yeah.
To help them get a better rank, which I don't know if it's weird or not. I think that's a whole new subject to cover, because I think the argument there is, it's unfair to the other guilds, but then in the same way, it's on all esports teams buying people from all over the place in order to become better?
Yeah, it depends if you want to see WoW raiding as an esport, which is, once again, probably an entirely different subject. Yeah. But the world first race, or just generally the raid race, has lots of weird little rules and, loads of little fiddly bits, and this just doesn't seem to fit into it. It's just this seems like a bad thing to do if you're trying to be sportsmanlike, but it doesn't matter. The boss has already died, and if that player wants to join that guild and get paid for it, then it's completely up to him. I'm sure, it might be against terms of service, I have no idea. who reads it. So, but either way, if it was, if it was going to get like a world third or world fourth kill, then maybe it'll be a bit more everyone up in arms about it. But I think they got sixth.
Yeah, I believe so.
So maybe like because it wasn't in the top 5 slot, not that many people cared about it. But I didn't really see it too much of an issue personally because, world first is kind of already gone.
Yeah.
Talking of gone, a lot of guilds are going down the drain and going casual now. The Great Burnout.
Yeah, it is the Nighthold Burnout. That is exactly what's happening. I think it's because the game has been very full on.
It has.
Because there is so much. Because of course, top end guilds, all they want to do is just get the split raids on the go. They want to get all their characters leveled up and geared so they can be in a position where they can actually carry mains in these heroic raids, so all the gear can just go to the mains.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, of course, you do need geared ults, otherwise it's just never going to work. But the problem with the game now in that regard is that, of course, people need to get artifact power, people need to get legendaries, you need to invest so much time in ults in order to actually do that, whereas in comparison, in the old days, you didn't really need to.
You could, at one point, you could say, my main's pretty much finished. Yeah, maybe I could get a Warforged item or something, but that comes from a raid anyway. So I'm kind of done with my main, I can work on my ults. You haven't been able to say, and I don't think anyone can say right now, I'm done on my main. Nobody's biz, someone can get an upgrade from somewhere.
Yeah.
And because of the way the legendary system works, of course, where you have to constantly grind, and if you haven't got biz legendaries, some legendaries are super impactful, especially for things like DPS, where of course damage was so tight in this instance, and you already had to have 54 really in order to kill the later bosses with good legendaries as well. There's so much stress going out on players if you want to raid at that top level. Of course, it's all self-inflicted stress, really. You don't have to play the game that much, but if you want to be in a position where you're competing with other guilds, well, if they're doing it, then we have to as well.
Yeah, it's just the requirement in order to actually get world first now is so much higher than what it was, say, in Warlords, in terms of the amount of time and effort that you actually need to put in the game. So, there's a lot of people burning out. Guilds like Danish Terrorists are no longer raiding from scratch. They're going to be going casual or something next tier, but for now, they're just done.
Yeah.
Midwinter and SNF had some issues, and it seems that they've now merged, and they've made this new guild, which is Solace. I'm not sure if they've killed Gul'dan yet.
I'm not entirely sure. I have to have a look.
But yeah, so that something happened there. A load of players obviously burnt out, and they just couldn't make a roster anymore.
And just generally hearing from lots of different guilds, people just kind of like, once it's over, I'm kind of done. I need a break. And with testing on the horizon already, some of the testing happening while the majority of the guilds are still progressing on the later bosses, it's kind of like you're dealing with one set of content, and normally you have like a little bit of like a downtime. Sometimes the downtime's been too much, and we've complained about it in the past. But when you already see bosses are being tested, Mythic testing is happening, which is like happening over this week. They're testing all the Mythic bosses, apart from the last one. They're doing it over the course of one weekend. People seeing that, and it's just like, holy shit. Am I going to have to do all of this? Do I have to keep playing this much in order to remain like in a competitive guild, in order to not let my guildies down, in order to make sure I can actually perform? Do I have to keep playing as much as I'm playing right now? Do I not have a chance to take a break? Sod it. I'm going to go play Counter-Strike or League of Legends or Hello Kitty Island Adventure, I'm just going to have a break now.
But see, the thing is, you're exactly right in that aspect. That is, if you're looking to be one of these top-end raiders, it is the most stressful it's ever been. But for the majority of players, if you play, say, 3 or 4 times a week, or maybe even less than that, maybe even just play on the weekends or something like that, the game is the best it's ever been.
Yeah, we are literally talking world first problems.
For everyone else, it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
because there's this constant stream of content coming out.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you finish one raid, well, you might not even finish the raid before another raid comes out. I think that's actually, that is arguably a negative thing.
Maybe.
And I think that's what happened to Helya, hence why they nerfed it.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
I didn't like that either. But the game is in a really, really good state. I mean, there's so much to do. Of course, all the Mythic Plus you can do. I mean, even if you're just playing one character, you're not playing any ults, just one character, there is so much to do.
Yeah.
And that's really good for the game. And it looks like 7.2 is going to bring even more. So, and it looks like 7.2 is coming soon as well. The way that they worded it is that 7.2 is going to be coming out within a couple of months, and then the raiding will come at some point after 7.2.
Which I think is the correct way of doing
Definitely
it. Because the thing is as well, is that it's quite a clever way of nerfing the current content without having to reduce its numbers. Because of course in 7.2 we get all of our artifact traits, we get new artifact knowledge. It's going up to 55.2 million according to the new PTR, which is kind of scary. We'll probably have to talk about that in another video as well. But there's going to be all of this new power you're going to be getting just flat because of your artifacts getting crazy and you're getting all these new traits. And just general other stuff, the way that legendaries are working with off specs, like people are going to be able to switch around a lot more and all that kind of stuff. With that, the content should just generally come easier because you're just stronger. Of course, one-shots are still going to one-shot and all that kind of stuff, and you'll still need to do the strats, but, you know, when you lump a bunch of extra damage or extra output generally into a raid, you can kind of stop worrying about some of the little fiddly bits that would normally...
I think just the traits alone will be a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the game, bottom line, the game is actually really good for the majority of people, and I assume that their sub numbers are really high. I mean, we don't know because they don't tell us anymore exactly what their sub numbers are. But this new model of releasing content super fast, keeping the game up to date all the time is great. It's really good for the game. It just sucks for the people that are trying to master it because there's too much to fucking do.
Yeah, it's just because new tiers always take so long to prepare for. It's just absolutely nuts. So I hope the 7.2 does come out quickly, but I kind of hope that Tomb of Sargeras takes its time. You know,
it'd be nice to just relax a bit, especially now that we finished the tier. It'd be like, and of course we've been working constantly in and out of game. Of course, obviously making YouTube content, streaming, but a lot of our work is also involved in game. You know, we're always online, always doing something.
Yeah.
And now is typically the time where we can just relax, just focus on like YouTube and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still the chance that, you know, if 7.2 comes out sooner than we think, we're going to have to go back in, have to work on our characters, have to get ready for all the split raids and everything like that. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to that if it does come soon. But yeah, we'll see how that one goes down. But going back to Nighthold, let's talk about the bosses. Let's talk about the instance as a whole. Let's talk about what we think about the instance.
So, well, I guess we should start from the very beginning.
Scorpion.
Let's have a look at little old Scorpion. So, I think he's a good beginning boss. Generally speaking, he's not like the most fun beginning boss we've ever had. Like, I'd say he's shitter than Kargath. I really enjoyed Kargath. It had like the whole upper phase and on Mythic, it had the pits that you had to try and avoid. Actually changed the strategy up a little bit, you know. It wasn't a hard boss. Kargath was one shot by most guilds. You just got annihilated on Mythic.
Same with Scorpion.
Yeah, well, same with Scorpion. Scorpion died very, very quickly, but he was still a good boss, whereas Scorpion, I really think his Mythic changes were kind of...
shit.
Boring.
I think Mythic Scorpion is a shit fight.
Yeah.
The changes they made to him are so small, and they don't really do anything.
No.
I mean, the green ad leaves a pool.
Kind of limits the
different crystals just do different things when you're stood near them. You only stand near them at one point.
Yeah, for the shockwave.
And all you need to do is move away afterwards. Everything else of the fight is exactly the same.
You could literally go in there and say, hide behind, like kill, like for a DPS at least, kill the ads, don't stand in front of the boss, go behind crystals. And then just play the game how you would normally play it. If there's green shit, don't stand in green shit. If something's going to explode and it's obvious, don't there's like no new... like area to, like, you know, normally with Mythic they add like something else that kind of changes up how you have to play the fight. Yeah. Even if it's in a minor way, like it's just a small change. Just something to keep you on your toes. Mythic Scorpion.
It's got nothing to do with difficulty.
No.
Absolutely nothing to do with difficulty. The first boss in Mythic should always be a lot easier than everything else.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that's just how they've always done it. It's something that works well because then, you know, it sort of allows guilds that maybe don't have necessarily the best players in the world to actually start venturing into Mythic. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely fine, but at least make it fun.
Yeah.
Mythic Scorpion's exactly the same as Heroic. There's no difference whatsoever. Let's move over and let's talk about Chronomac Anomaly. Exactly the same case.
Arguably, I think that
it's exactly the same, except you can't stay in power overwhelming as long.
Well, yeah.
I think if you use the strategy of stay in power overwhelming as long as you possibly can, break at the latest point, it's exactly the same.
Except you have to send two people off to go and interrupt an ad.
Sure, but there's one extra ad. There's no fucking difference.
Well, the thing is, like, I think that boss was like kind of defeated by that strat. As in, I thought the cool aspect of the fight was having maybe to split your raid in two and like work separately on different like areas of the room in order to like kill the ads at the same time and then all that kind of stuff. But because you can just keep the boss in power overwhelming and just kind of nuke him down, and then, you know, once you have to break him, then you can send everyone else to go kill the other ad, which normally like a demon hunter in the tank is just, you know, dealing with.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's kind of like, you know, it feels very similar to Heroic once again. And like, considering this boss is a master of like time itself, and he's like infused with the night well and all this kind of nonsense.
They could have done some cool shit.
Yeah, they could have done some, I don't know, maybe some more interesting
stuff. Do you remember the orbs on PTR? So the orbs on PTR...
Oh, good, where they came out and then they started rotating around the boss.
Yeah, so the orbs on PTR, the way that when they came out, they didn't just fly to the back of the room. They'd actually spin around the boss. Mm-hmm. Why did they turn that off? They should have kept that.
Maybe just for Mythic, yeah, considering it was already in the game. Like, it wasn't that much different. But yeah, like, once again, it's kind of... not difficulty-wise, although we actually struggled on that fight the first time we did it.
Because
we
we're
used the wrong strat.
with
Yeah,
wrong
that was
strat,
our bad. But not even the difficulty of it. It's just, once again, very similar. It just doesn't feel like the design space, like the area, like the coolness of the boss. Even within the lore, probably, you could do so much more cool stuff with him.
Yeah.
And it just feels like wasted potential. And unfortunately, it kind of carries over once again to Trilliax. Me and Liz are just going to shit over the first 3 bosses. Overall, I think Nighthold's good. We'll
let's
talk
get that
positively
out of the way now.
about the good bosses later.
But the first 3 bosses suck. Trilliax is exactly the same as the first 2. Obviously, the introduction of the ad changes things a bit, but it still plays out exactly the same, except there's an ad that you must kill.
Yeah, like, once again, I like Chronomatic Anomaly and Trilliax as fights. It's just their Mythic versions don't change anything up enough for it to really matter.
We're shitting on Mythic here.
Yeah.
But we're not shitting on Heroic.
Yeah, I don't like Scorpion at all ever. But I actually like Chronomatic Anomaly and Trilliax, but it's just their Mythic changes are so It's just kind of like, this is the minimal amount that you need to put in to make the boss different. Spawning the ad. The spawning the ad, like, in terms of, like, the idea behind it is in, like, his personality has now jumped into another, like, old broken robot. That's kind of like a cool idea, but nothing really happens about it. All it is kill the ad nice and quickly while soaking more cake, and you kind of have to soak the cake during the annihilation, which kind of, is a little bit awkward.
I think if the ad had maybe had significantly more health, it might make it, just by making the fight slightly more difficult, would have made it better almost in a way. I'd probably not, actually. I feel like I'm talking out my ass.
I don't know,
there,
but
actually.
like this, once again, maybe add
There's
another...
a thin line between difficult and fun.
Well,
and sometimes by making a fight simply more difficult makes it more fun.
But I wouldn't say
But I don't think that would necessarily work on Trilliax. There was, again, just a lack of mythic changes to actually make the fight, like, engaging.
Well, considering this is like a crazy robot, maybe they could, like, add another one of his personalities in there where you have to deal with, like, a new set
An
of
extra
stuff.
phase.
Or maybe he shrinks you down and lobs you in a cake and you need to escape the cake. Something like that. I don't know. There's loads of little things you have to do. It's like a silly fight anyway, because you're running around eating cake.
Yeah.
And like your raid leader shouting at you, "Why haven't you eaten cake?" And it's both scary and funny at the
Hilarious,
same time.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Once again, just kind of like, there's so many cool ideas that I think they could have implemented quite easily into the boss, and it's just just not there.
Lack of potential.
Yeah. The thing is that a fight where I think maybe a lack of potential could have been an issue, I don't think actually was, and that's talking about Spellblade. Spellblade on Heroic, I found that a lot of her mechanics can kind of be ignored. Like the Mark of Frost, generally speaking...
It was just run into each other after, it's actually starting to hurt a bit.
Yeah. Oh, I'm actually kind of dying. Just run it. And if it goes into melee, well, this is a bit of a mess.
Just
whatever.
fucking chain hill.
You kind of deal with it. Yeah, you chain hill. Whereas on Heroic, on Mythic even, although there was the addition of the new Fel ad, generally speaking... she kind of was just more of an annoyance more than anything else. Like in phase...
in the first phase, in the Frost phase, you could cheese it just by running it down the corridor, and then that would keep it away from the rest of your raid. In the Fire phase, again, it was just more an annoyance rather than anything else. And the Arcane phase actually had a big impact, especially for your healers, of course. There's a massive swipe going out on that your entire raid needs to get hit by. However, I can definitely see how your whole idea on Trilliax of like an extra new phase would make it more interesting. That would definitely work on Spellblade. You could have that aspect of, instead of having the Fel ad, just have, say, a Fel phase after the Arcane one. That would have been pretty interesting. But I think the fact that just because the fight was so much more difficult, just because they ramped up the damage of the Frost by so much, they ramped up the damage of the Fire ads, and like the fact that you had to land an interrupt or almost anyone in your raid is going to be globaled, as well as it's fundamental that you do the purple ad perfectly.
Yeah, because they channel so quickly.
Because they channel so quickly, you have to have them stacked. They basically made the fight heroic, but you had to do it perfectly. I think actually was good enough for me. Yeah. I actually think that's one of the best fights in there.
Yeah, because it, like on Heroic, naturally it was kind of a lot more lax. It was like relaxed, you could you can mess up a little bit. Oh, the Frost, you've detonated it in China, it doesn't matter, we'll pick up the ad or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just by making the mechanics more impactful, and you really need to make sure that you deal with them in a very careful way, and there's a lot of communication needs to go on as well. I like it a lot. The thing is that Felad, you was kind of talking about it, really all that Felad does, it just kind of re-emphasizes what you should kind of be doing in the phase already. So like in the Frost phase, it kind of spins around a bit, it like is just annoying, but you can kind of counter that. But in the Fire phase, it's like you need to spread out because of the jump, but you're kind of already spread out because she's dashing to everyone and you don't want to get knocked around. And then the Arcane phase, you need to be stacked up because of the orbs landing, but you also need to be stacked up because of her slash. It kind of like She doesn't really add anything apart from just being a bit
It
annoying.
didn't change strategies.
Not really. It was more of just something for the tank to deal with. Maybe it was more interesting for that fight for like tanks because instead of just standing next to your partner for the annihilation all the time and maybe picking up the elementals that spawn, now you actually have like a whole mechanic that you have to deal with and you're getting knocked back all over the place. Maybe it was more fun for them.
True.
But at least as a DPS, I did enjoy the fight, but I found that ad just to be kind of like, what the hell is it even doing here, But yeah, I thought that was a good boss. Moving on to Croesus.
So Croesus, Mythic was shit. I understand that the whole point of the fight is that it's a damage check. And I think the damage check was actually quite fair.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
I don't think it was too ridiculous, but at the same time, it wasn't too low. I think it was well placed.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think the Mythic change is just shit. It's just adds in power and they kill people.
Yeah.
Interrupt them and kill them off. Make sure you soak properly. Again, it's kind of like Heroic Plus rather than Mythic.
Yeah, and even on Heroic, you can't ignore those ads. If enough of those ads spawn, you're going to wipe anyway, because unless you can like mass CC them and kill them off.
Blow them up super
yeah,
quick,
because on Heroic, they still do cleave damage, and you know that, like, especially like people in melee and stuff like that, they're very likely to be stacked on top of each other. A couple of those splashes go off, and even on Heroic, you're going to die. So those ads were always of utmost importance, even in the lower difficulty. Now moving into Mythic, you got to make sure you soak and kill off the ads. So nothing actually changes. The boss still does his beam, which you still need to move out of. He still does his orb, which just does more damage. It's just kind of like a test for your... It's just an output test. Your healers need to be very well organized in order to make sure that they get
there's
the
like
cooldowns
two
in the right
set
place.
points where cooldowns have to be used, otherwise it's a wipe. But providing you land them, healing the fight's exactly the same.
Yeah, I like once again the potential is like there to, I don't know, with the beam mechanic as an
the
example.
The beams should be coming from fucking the side of the bridge, or they should be moving, or you should have to like somehow, I don't know, maybe like fucking islands spawn like on the left or the right hand side, and both beams go down both sides. You have to jump on these islands that form. You could do so much shit with that boss.
Yeah,
just because he's on a bridge and sends down beams, there is so much potential. With like different mechanics you can throw at people, make the fight more interesting, but they decided just to make the ads go big and put a fucking damage requirement on it.
Yeah, so once again, it was just like...
It was Heroic Plus, not Mythic.
Yeah, it was missed potential of the boss. And once again, I don't hate Croesus.
It's still a good fight.
Yeah, it's a good... I think it's one of,
but
like, once again,
Mythic.
a good patchwork fight, but it's just the Mythic changes, once again, were a bit lacking. But fortunately, for the rest of the instance, that's kind of where the Mythic changes... I kind of think like the lacking of Mythic changes kind of stop, because all of the other bosses change up the fight enough for me to go, oh shit, okay, I've got to learn again.
I actually disagree.
Why?
Well, let's talk about Botanist.
What? Botanist changes an absolute ton of Mythic.
Okay, so on Botanist you got the 3 ads from the very start rather than just one.
Yeah.
But for the first 2 phases, it's Heroic.
Oh, no, it's not.
Yes, it is. It's Heroic all the way till the end. Okay, in the second phase, there is some augmentation on one of the abilities. For us, we chose to spawn the ads out of the fire pillars, whatever the fuck they're called, the fire spheres.
Yeah.
But it's still fucking Heroic. It's still kill the ads. Kill the spheres, kill the ads. Kill the sphere, kill the ad.
The thing is, the one criticism I actually have of that fight is because it kind of does take quite a long time to get to the points where it actually is super crazy. Of course, phase 3, when it's only one boss left and he's augmented all of his abilities, so you get multiple of them at once, so you're getting ads spawn out of the tank as he spawns a controlled chaos on top of them, and the balls are spawning spheres, and the mark you get on you is making you just send out loads of beams of fire, and it's awful, and I died to it all the time. You know,
you were fucking
I was
shit on
so
that fight.
terrible on that fight. I think I single-handedly caused 50 wipes. I don't think we even had
not
that
50,
many.
but yeah.
Probably half of the wipes were because of me. I felt so bad on that fight. So yeah, I do kind of agree with you that phase 1, it's kind of, you've already done it.
The way that you fix that fight and you actually make it a good Mythic encounter is that the first 2 mobs that you kill have, say, half the amount of health they do now, and the very last mob has double the health that he has now. That way you get to deal with all the new mechanics where it's super crazy and there's all this shit going on for twice as long as what you do right now. Because the last phase in itself, I mean, of course, it depends on what kill order you've done, but the strategy that a lot of guilds were using that I think they copied from, I think it was Method. The method where they were killing people off with the debuff.
Yeah, sacrifice.
Yeah, they were
strat.
sacrificing the players.
Quite a lot of
with the
people
cool
were
at
doing
night.
that.
Yeah, I think the only guilds that didn't do that from scratch, I believe, used that strategy, but they didn't kill the players off. Instead, they just told them to go run off with a partner.
That's so risky.
I believe they did that. So they were just running, well away from the raid.
Yeah.
And they were just running around in circles. And Serenity used a completely different kill order, and theirs actually looks really clean the way they're doing it. We actually tried it on farm recently.
Yeah, we got the boss pretty low, and then it kind of died, and was like, we haven't got that much time. We need to get back to Gul'dan or Elisande, wherever we were at, and was like, okay, just do it the old way, but we'll come back to this way. But yeah, I like that fight because of all the choices you can make and everything. But I do kind of agree with you that the first 2 phases are a little bit. Like not enough changes in phase 2. But
that's what I'm saying. I mean, if they made it so the last phase was longer, you wouldn't be able to use that strategy of cheesing because you just wouldn't have enough reses, which means you'd be forced to deal with a mechanic, which actually would make the fight more. It'd make it more difficult, which I guess isn't always necessarily a great thing. I mean, it depends on a boss's position within an instance, depending on how difficult it should be.
Yeah.
It would just make the fight more mythic.
Oh, I don't know. I think
would.
the fight has enough changes for you to definitely feel the difference, and you can definitely see at a glance whether or not it's mythic
Me
or
and
not.
you disagree on this boss then.
Oh, well.
Completely disagree.
Let's
move over to fucking Tichondrius.
Okay.
I'm bored of talking about this. It's a shit fight.
All right, Tichondrius. I liked him. I don't really have like strong feelings one way or another. It felt very much like it was just very testing on your healers, and you needed to kind of have a strat where you had, you're rotating in like immunity soakers or tanks to make sure that they take all of the debuffs at once.
So just to people so everyone knows how the boss works. The main change on Mythic is the fact that the Carrion Plague and the Seeker Swarm will now one-shot you if you have Carrion Plague.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you have someone block it because it doesn't actually pass through players like it does on Heroic. So at first glance, it appears that you need to sort of like make a line of people with Carrion Plague and then have a line of people in front of them just to block it when the Seeker Swarm is cast. But instead, you could just have a single player take every single hit and just get a huge stack, and then you just spam heal them. Or you just let them die and use a res tome on them or something like that, or even a battle res. So that was the main change in the fight, and you just rotate either your tanks on it or your rogues on it. But to add on top of that is that the boss actually had a pretty decent damage requirement.
Yep.
Again, it was kind of like Crosus. I'd say it's probably less than Crosus. It was more be good at the game, make sure that you don't die. If you manage to do that, then the boss will die. And that was cool. That's the kind of damage requirements I think work.
Well, I was on pretty much you need to have some people just killing the ads the entire time while other people kind of like focus down the boss. I was on the ads the entire time, and I did feel like I was always doing something, which was quite nice. I had to try and prepare my damage so I could burst down the ads as quickly as I can and MD them to the tank and make sure I'm like blowing up the brands because the brands now leave fire on the ground. And even in the bat phase, if you don't get the orb, then you're going to die because if you will literally just get one shot if you don't have an orb when you leave. So I felt that the fight was always keeping you on your toes. I didn't get bored towards the end of it.
I have a funny story regarding brands.
Oh, God.
So apparently how the mechanic of the brand works is they'll always go on a range player or a healer.
Right.
But if you don't have ranged players in your raid, it'll only ever go on healers. And once you have a brand and a new brand is cast, nothing happens.
Well, because there's no new target.
There's no new targets. So what some guilds were doing when they were progressing it the very first week, some of the top end guilds, I won't say any names just because I don't want to start any shit. But I know this happened for a fact, that they were just bringing pure melee comps. So when the brands came out, it was a mechanic that you never had to deal with. And I think it was actually Serenity, on their kill, they didn't even pop any brands. Every brand that came out, they just left it.
Was it Serenity?
I think it was Serenity, yeah. So they had all their ranged players with just brands. And they just were constantly spread apart from each other, so they never popped them.
Well, the thing is, when you need to hide behind the pillars, which is normally the things that the brands prevent, you can just stand in a line.
Yeah.
Because you need to be pretty stacked up in order to break these brands. And, if you're just slightly spread apart, as long as you're within line of sight, then you don't take any extra damage. I guess you can do it. It'll be annoying during the bat phase, I imagine, though. Trying to collect an orb while you have a brand on you and try not to run over at least like 4 or 5 other people is going to be fiddly, to say the least. But fair enough.
But yeah, that whole melee strat was deemed an exploit by Blizzard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Blizzard actually contacted the guild, or a GM contacted the guild and said, yeah, fucking stop. So I think they learned from Helya.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to get banned quickly, go to Tichondrius with just melee.
Or just go to
or just go fucking...
High Botanist and just spawn a bunch of parasites.
Or go to Star Augur and teleport out of the room.
Yeah,
let's talk about Star Augur. Star Augur is one of the best mythic bosses they've ever made.
Really?
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah.
It's very good.
As a healer, the whole 2 healing thing, obviously is... Oh, well, we can talk about that, I guess. But 2 healing that fight was fucking awesome. I just thought it was a brilliant fight. Absolutely amazing fight.
No, I do like it. I think there's a lot of really good aspects to it. I like the fact that each time you pull it, it's different. Because, of course, the main thing, which is the Grand Conjunction, which is, if you've seen any of the videos, the little marks that you get above your heads... you got to go to match someone with the same sort of star sign as you, and you got to do it within 10 seconds. If you don't do it within 10 seconds, then your mark will explode and make it so everyone takes 200% extra damage for like 3 minutes.
It's a wipe. If anyone explodes, it's a wipe.
And the thing is, if you go over the top of anyone with a mark that isn't the same as yours, you also explode. So,
and this ability happens, 15 times or something?
Maybe not that
throughout
many.
The entire
it's like
fight?
About 9 or 10 times or something.
It happens a lot.
And at horrible overlap points as well. So,
especially in fell phase.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with that, and it always keeps you on your toes, and you've always got to be thinking where to go. On top of the randomness of whether or not you get the ejections on you, whether it's the fell one where you've got to try and place it within the new meteors that are coming down to limit the amount of space, so you can get as much space as you can to spread out for the ground conjunction. Or whether it's just even getting the icy one. You've got to try and find a place, because when you leave an icy ejection now, it spawns a crystal, so it limits the amount of room you get, and towards the end of the phase, it's getting a bit scary, so there's a lot of shit going on in that fight. And I like the fact that it's different every time, and I just like how you have a mechanic, and if you don't deal with it, if one person fucks it up, yeah, that's it, goodbye. Yeah. There's no coming back. And
it was the first boss where the mythic changes really hit.
Yeah, it was really vicious. It was really, really vicious.
And that's why so many guilds, it took them so long to kill it. And of course, this is where some of the weird shit starts, where they decided to change the boss mid-tier. So around, I think it was 15 guilds or 18 guilds, something like that, had killed it. And what Blizzard decided to do was buff/nerf it.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say if it is a buff or if it is a nerf. They just changed it. Mm-hmm. They essentially increased the damage that the boss deals with the frost and the fire debuffs by 100%, which is a huge deal.
Yeah,
I just want to point that out now. Hard. It's a huge fucking deal. They do so much more damage. But they did nerf the boss's health by 5%. Mm-hmm. So the damage requirement on him was now much lower. And they nerfed the health of the ads in the last phase by 45%.
Making killing them actually a viable strat.
Well, it was a viable strat anyway. Some guilds were killing the boss by killing the ad first and then swapping to the boss, but the damage requirement for that was still absurd. But even more absurd was just nuking the boss with the ad up, which a lot of guilds did after they saw Serenity do it. That's how we did it, at least.
Yeah.
So I'm sure some of our viewers have seen our kill video that we put out. But yeah, the nerfs that they did to the boss definitely made the last phase easier, because you can just kill the first ad and nuke the boss, which means you didn't have to bring stupid healing comps where you're forced to have Aura Mastery, you're forced to have Spirit Link Totem, you're forced to have the Ankh Totem. Basically, you had to have all these fucking CDs available just to survive like the 4th and 5th explosion, which was just ridiculous. Whereas now you don't really need to do that. So it opened up an avenue to bring different healing comps, but also with the damage increase in phase 1 and 2 from the Frost debuff and the Fell debuff, it forces you pretty much to bring 3 healers, and some guilds are even 4 healing it.
Yeah, I generally think that the new version of the boss...
It's probably better.
It's better for the game, a hell of a lot better for the game, because, of course, it means that guilds don't have the opportunity to only bring 2 healers because they haven't got the rest of the damage to bring, or if they haven't got ridiculous amount of DPS in last phase, and generally speaking, it's just a lot more fluid for compositions.
It just doesn't really make that much sense to get to a fight where you have to bench half your healers.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even more than half if you bring 5 healers to some of your fights.
So the fact that, it's kind of been updated so you can kind of bring a bit more of a varied comp, I think is a good thing, because although I think making a good comp is a very fundamental part of Mythic, it shouldn't be so strict that you kind of get screwed over just because you can't facilitate only having 2 healers. So I think the new version of the boss is better. It kind of sucks that they kind of changed it mid-tier. The reason being is that if you've already killed the boss, you kind of had to go back and sort of reprogress it.
Well, it took us at least 2 hours to re-kill it. At least 2 hours. And we did fuck around with strats that just didn't work for us. Mm-hmm. But yeah, having to re-kill it again was a complete pain in the ass. If you ask me now if I could change it back to the old version, I probably would, but the only reason for that is because we did it. If we didn't, if we hadn't have done that strategy, then yeah, the new version is much easier in my opinion, in regards to the last phase, which is probably the hardest part, especially if your damage is shit. Yeah. If you have really good damage, then maybe the last strategy might even be easier for you.
Yeah, generally speaking, though, I do like the boss, even in its changed form. It kind of sucks that they changed it midway. It's just kind of like moving the goalposts a little bit, but they kind of probably moved it at the correct time because more guilds were getting to it that couldn't bring that composition.
Yeah.
Hopefully, in the future, that Blizzard will get better at seeing fights where they're going to have stupid comps for it, and they kind of make it so you necessarily shouldn't bring those comps. Maybe they should make less fights where you're going to 2-heal it. You should, if a fight can be 2-healed on Mythic, then increase the damage the boss does. So you have to bring
and then
3
nerf
healers.
damage requirements.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's important to try and keep those comps together.
And really, those are, of course, are things that should be done before the bosses even come out.
But some things are going to slip through the net.
Sometimes, yeah, things slip through the net, and it's just a mistake they made. So we gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I still give them the benefit of the doubt. And then we got to Magistrix. We killed Magistrix, and then they did the exact same fucking thing.
Yeah.
The exact thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they did it across all difficulties as well, which was quite interesting. It wasn't just Mythic that they made the changes. They reduced her health and increased the amount of damage she did. She does that cascading star, I think it's called, which is pretty much just random bits of chain lightning damage to the raid. So yeah. They kind of just did that, which is, once again, weird, making it so you, once again, some guilds already killed it with 3 healers, but if you hadn't...
But in the first phase, you pretty much 2-healed it.
Yeah.
So they'd have one healer who was just literally just full DPSing the boss,
Yeah.
and then having the extra healer would be more helpful towards the end of the fight, where you have the extra CDs to use them on the bombs exploding, as an example, or even on the beams in phase 2 was pretty damn useful. Whereas now it's strictly a 3 or 4 healer fight. I think most guilds are 4 healing it. Just because the damage is that much higher. I remember when the changes were made, they didn't even put out a blue post.
Not until a couple days later.
Yeah, so we went in there and we were pulling the boss, and I'm on like fucking 2 million HPS in phase 1. I'm like, this isn't normal. And we're like fucking wiping, and everyone's looking at the healers like, can you just heal more? Can you use some fucking cooldowns or something?
It was only until, has the boss got a little bit less health? It's like, they've star augured her. God, no.
And then that joke happened on Gul'dan as well.
Yeah, we thought
We're halfway through Gul'dan, and we're like, hold on, damage is pretty high at the moment. Is the boss's health gone down?
Yeah, well, fortunately they haven't changed Gul'dan at all. But let's talk about Magistrix as a boss herself, at least. I thought that, not talking about the end of the fight, which I have quite a lot of issues with, and I know that you do as well. The beginning, generally speaking, the changes that they made on Mythic, I thought were pretty cool.
So the design of the fight in itself, not even talking about Mythic, just in itself is very clever. The way that phase 1 completely sets up the rest of the fight. Everything that is used in phase 1 is echoed into phase 2, and then echoed into phase 3. So if you have 3 rings in phase 1, you have 3 rings in every single phase.
Yeah.
Which meant in phase 1, it is kill the boss as soon as you possibly can, just to limit the amount of abilities that you have to deal with in phase 2. And in phase 2, it's exactly the same. Kill it as quick as you possibly can to limit the amount of orbs and beams you see in phase 3.
Yeah.
And that's a cool way of dealing with the fight. And it makes it a lot better once you get to farm as well, because you might get in a position where you just have to deal with virtually no mechanics because you just blow up phase 1 that quick. But that mechanic in itself also has some downsides where it gets to a point, especially towards the end of the fight, where there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
The strategy in phase 1 is nuke the boss, wait until you get that first purple ad, kill it outside the raid, everyone gets the buff, Bloodlust, use all your cooldowns and nuke the living shit out the boss, healers included.
Yeah.
And the idea is you just end phase 1 as soon as you possibly can. And the rest of the fight, it's not easy. There are still, there's 3 interrupt rotations that you need to have.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
That is fucking shit.
Yeah, so the interrupt rotations, which fortunately I was part of, I hated it. I hate interrupt rotations anyway, because I'm always scared I'm going to miss it. And while you're trying to avoid the orbs coming back at you, which I love that mechanic, by the way, very, very cool. But like trying to dodge all of this stuff, and you have range issues, even as a hunter with a 51-yard range on my interrupt. Still, sometimes you get a little bit dicked and you can't get to the ad in time. And like in phase 2 and 3, if you miss a key interrupt, you wipe. It's not, oh, someone dies, you need to res them. No, it can extend the duration of her beam ability, or with the expedite, I can't remember what it does. Oh no, with the expedite in phase 3, it'll make it so the bombs immediately explode. So yeah, interrupts are super important. If you miss a single one, either someone's going to die or you're just going to flat out wipe. Doing that on top of everything else, I personally don't find that fun. No. Maybe other people do. I haven't spoken to anyone that does. Find interrupt rotations particularly engaging. I don't like it as a game mechanic, but it certainly was difficult. I think it added another layer of difficulty to the fight. But yeah, you're totally right. Towards the end of the phase, the fight even, once you got to that point where you kind of dealt with the 2 debuff waves that you get, you kind of just sit there and it's like, okay, the boss has to die now while you're interrupting. And there's kind of...
Yeah, there's 2 ads that you need to interrupt while the boss is on like 50% health and you just nuke it.
Yeah, it's very anticlimactic considering how much like movement and how much crazy stuff is happening towards the beginning of every phase. It kind of gets towards the end of those phases and it's kind of like, eh.
It would have been much better if they made it so all the mechanics were just spread throughout all phases. You had to deal with a set amount, something like that. Or maybe make it so every phase has some like ridiculous enrage timer instead.
I think it just comes down to the fact that because you kind of set the tone at the beginning of the fight, the better you do there, the more chill it is going to be later. So it kind of rewards you for doing that, but because you're kind of
as a result, it makes the fight shit.
Towards the end, the ending is bad. I would say the rest of the fight, although I don't like the interrupt rotation, I do like the rest of the fight.
I love healing it. Yeah, there's a lot to fucking heal. It's very fun.
It's crazy. You've got to do a lot of coordinated movement. You've got to make sure you put all the spanning singularities on the edge. Otherwise, if they're in a bad position, you're fucked. You've got to have crazy orb soaking locations as the tank's running out and doing a shit ton of fall-off damage to the entire raid. It's really intense. There's a lot of micromanagey sort of things you need to do with it in order to make sure you can meet the damage requirement. So I think it is a good fight, but interrupt rotations suck, and the ending's a bit boring. So that's like the kind of two flaws with Magistrix.
Yeah, it's not a terrible fight by any means.
Not at all. It's just those two gripes kind of annoy the shit out of me.
Yeah, they're just problems.
Yeah.
And like I say, in regards to, I just said, make it so there's like an crazy enrage time. I don't mean like make it so like there's a ridiculous damage requirement, but if you made it so the abilities were spread out, so maybe you deal with the exact same amount of abilities that you do now, but make it so they're a little bit more spread out, so you actually have to deal with them towards the end of phase 3 rather than just sitting there and looking at the boss.
Well, having to dodge maybe an extra set of orbs or something. So say
even if it's just something minor at the end.
Yeah.
Of both, I mean, it's the same for phase 2.
Yeah, to an extent.
You dodge so many rings and then just stand there like, oh, orbs will spawn soon. Apart from that, I've got to interrupt and kill the boss.
Well, the thing is, if you get the third set of orbs as well, it's kind of like, well,
it's over anyway. Yeah, you just wipe at that point. There's no point.
So, it's pretty weird design. It's an interesting boss. They haven't really done something like this where you kind of set the tone of the rest of the fight by how well you do in subsequent phases. I think it's clever. I think it's just literally a byproduct of it. It's just going to happen anyway if you do it like this. So, it's a good fight, though, overall. It's just a bit fiddly.
Let's talk about Gul'dan.
Yes, so we actually killed it. Pretty happy with that.
I think it's one of the... I wouldn't say it's one of the best bosses ever. Especially for an end boss, it's not one of the best bosses ever, but I actually think it's a really, really fucking good fight. I think phase 1 and 2 are particularly really fucking good. It's just a really well-made, excellent timing, your bog standard rinse and repeat, Manor off Archimon style fight, and I love it. But the problem I have with it is phase 3. Before we get into phase 3, should we talk about the other phases?
Yeah, before we talk about phase 3, generally speaking for this fight, it's 16 minutes long or 15 minutes if you manage to do the quick kill strat in phase 3. So it's a long old fight, and they've had a long fight. I think this is the longest fight since Margok. I think Margok
was a 16, or was it 18 minutes?
It was a very fucking long fight, Margok. I really liked Margok. I do like Gul'dan, but once again, it's just so long. It's very tedious.
It doesn't feel long. Try healing it. It doesn't feel long at all. It feels brilliant.
Now that you're saying that, honestly, there are points where you do have to stop damage. Like at the end of phase 1, you can stop damage to help the healers out a little bit, and phase 2, you're supposed to stop damage. Although most of the time we ended up not bothering.
We just pushed it.
Yeah, we just kind of pushed it, which kind of made our transition maybe a little bit more sketchy than it needed to be, but it was obviously good enough. So maybe there are points where it's a little bit of a lull.
I think we outgeared it by the time we got to it a bit.
Yeah, probably. In comparison to the people who world firsted it, of course
we didn't take any particularly long pauses in order to transition at set points.
So yeah, like you are always on your toes, and because of the nature of how the fire works in phase 2, like if you get the Flame of Sargeras, you've always got to be on your toes. Where am I going to go with this fire? How am I going to place it? How do I not screw over anyone else? Has anyone else near me got the fire? Do I need to spread out for an ad? There's so much you need to be thinking about. So it does keep you on your toes, and it isn't too like boring. You have always got to do stuff. Even in phase 1, like you got to think, how am I going to be breaking my chains? Am I going to be going to a healer, or can I solo it? Is it better I solo it now, or do I solo it later? Am I in the right position? Am I going to be knocked into fires? There's all these questions you've got to be constantly asking yourself, which once again keeps the fight fresh throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. I just like the way that you progress it. I like these types of fights where you literally learn it step by step, but I can see how when you get to 16 minutes, it's like, fucking hell. Well, you're just exhausted by the end of the pool.
Yeah, once you get into phase 3, like phase 3 itself is kind of deceptively... It's actually relatively simple. It's not like there isn't so many crazy interweaved sort of mechanics.
It's arguably easy.
Yeah, if phase 3 was just a fight by itself...
I mean, we spoke about this at the beginning of the video. Yeah. If you was to like be one of the first guilds to progress this...
Of course not.
It's probably fucking very hard.
But that's because it took 10 minutes to get there.
And you don't know anything. You literally know nothing.
Well, even if, like, say the Demon Within boss was just lobbed somewhere else in the instance as a solo encounter, you'd kill it within 20 pulls.
Yeah, you would, yeah.
Like, if you just, I don't know, you could go to Tichondrius or you go Demon Within. You just go Demon Within, you easily kill it. Because it isn't actually that crazy. It's got, like, a fairly strict damage requirement, yes. and there's quite a lot of movement and everything, and you got to make sure that you deal with debuffs in a very controlled way. You've got to do all of these things. But really, you'd go to the demon within, and really you'd just kill it like within 20 or 30 pulls, even if you knew nothing about it. But once again, as we said, it takes at least 10 minutes to get there, and once you're there,
I don't know if you say even if you don't know anything about it, I disagree.
Well, okay, no,
I don't
it wouldn't take you 20 or 30 pulls if you were literally pioneering it.
I think it'd take you like 50 or more,
Well,
or maybe even 100.
If you were pioneering it,
maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. But yeah, I think obviously the fact that you have to spend 10 minutes of perfect play to even get there.
And it's not easy. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are not easy phases.
No, they're not.
The wins on that... God, the wins. The wins are so much stronger on Mythic. Oh, God. The amount of times
you have to pretty much be all the way on the other side of the platform,
and
you have to run against it the entire time in order not to get pushed off, unless you have movement speed increase.
Or you backpedal at the correct time.
Or you backpedal, yeah. So there's like some weird... I mean, I guess it's an exploit. I guess you can
more of like
call
a bug with it,
It's just a bug. If you stop backpedaling the moment that the winds start, if you catch it at the perfect timing, you just stand still.
Yeah, I managed to achieve it a couple of times. I tried every single time at the beginning of the phase, and I think I got it like 3 or 4 times out of the like huge amount of pulls that we did.
Didn't really gain too much.
I've seen quite a few guilds who've managed to make it really consistent. Like everyone manages to stand still.
Really?
I'm pretty sure there is a thing to it. I'm just not 100% sure. A couple of people in the guild managed to do it a couple of times quite consistently. But yeah, it was kind of like a mini game before phase 2 started.
You don't really gain anything.
Well, as a melee DPS, Gul'dan stands still while the winds are going on. So if you backpedal right next to Gul'dan, you can continue doing damage to him.
I guess.
But that kind of pushes damage in a phase where really the damage requirement on the boss isn't super tight.
No.
You know.
Well, it's just can you nuke him from 10% to 0 in 30 seconds?
And can you kill the eyes?
Yeah,
and the eyes in this phase, like literally, you need to tunnel into them. And
there's a reason why almost every comp that has killed this boss is using 3 demon hunters.
Yeah.
Just eyes and parasites.
Parasites last phase as well, which can only be attacked by melee, which is, once again, you bring so many melee to that fight. It's such a melee-heavy comp.
I mean, that's because you... that's simply just because of the way that the Hellfire works.
Yeah.
If Hellfire... Because Hellfire only targets ranged players, not including healers, only ranged players. If you had a ranged heavy comp, they'd all have to move as a single unit the entire time. Damage would be so shit.
Yeah.
So bringing like a large amount of melee actually is really beneficial.
And of course, melee are generally good at killing those eyes anyway.
They're great at killing eyes, they're great at killing parasites. Their damage in phase 2 is pretty solid.
Yep.
So melee are just perfect for this fight.
Which
makes a nice change.
Yeah, the whole instance has actually been relatively, minus maybe Magistrix, this instance has been really melee
solid
friendly.
for melee, yeah.
Yeah. I've seen some posts on Mo Champion. There was one thread.
Oh god.
That was saying, "Is the instance too easy on melee? Should we be given more stuff?" And I've spoken to a couple of people who have played melee, not necessarily in our guild, but like just generally friends and stuff, who have said melee's kind of like, what am I doing on some of the
lack
bosses?
of responsibility maybe sometimes.
But the thing is that really, if you look at some of the fights, like the hard ones, like Star Augur, you have to be spread in a really tight area. They still get the ground conjunction. They still get they get the same amount of shit that range have to deal with in that fight. Magistrix, I'd never want to be a melee DPS on Magistrix because the amount she teleports around and you've got to be right on top of her the entire time. Like, screw that.
But on Gul'dan, they haven't got shit to do apart from soak.
Well, Gul'dan, they still get fires on them, which they need to be placing out.
That's true. That's true.
The only thing that I would say that they, like in phase 1, they'd have to deal with the Hellfire, yes. But in phase 2, the only thing they'd have to do is be targeted by eyes. They have to deal with everything else. And in phase 3, arguably, they kind of have more to do. Because they have to kill off all the parasites, they need to stun them. Whilst the range, I guess the only thing that range do that they don't is that they kind of damage an orb and they have to pre-move out of the circles.
Yeah, but pre-moving, I think, is a really important task. I mean, it's all fucking important, isn't it? If you don't do it right, then the boss is going to fucking kill you. But
on some of the earlier bosses, some people were kind of complaining about the lack of things for melee to do.
Spellblade, melee do fuck all.
They don't really
Trilliacs, I mean, they just kill boss. Half of them don't even soak cakes because, well, fuck it, range can do it.
Most of the time, range can do it, in all fairness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think it's a huge issue. It's maybe something to keep an eye on because beforehand, of course, before this expansion came out, I think we made an episode.
Just constantly dicked.
Yeah, we made an episode called Mythic and Melee DPS, and of course, Melee DPS in the past have always been a very limited, a very competitive spot for you to bring. You can't bring like 8 Melee DPS to a fight. You kind of have to on Gul'dan, which is like a massive swing in what you need to bring, like in a composition sort of wise. So,
and just cleave is just mental. Like, it's
it helps that melee DPS are also doing an absolute ton of damage.
Soaking.
Yeah,
just keep the DRs up. The demon hunters absolutely destroy the eyes.
Yeah, the melee also happen to have a lot of damage. So not only do they have a lot of damage, but of course the instance is kind of like
The instance is really good for
It's
them.
just nice to them.
Really good for them.
Where maybe beforehand it hasn't been. So it's probably a good thing, but you got to be really careful in making an instance nice for melee, but you've got to also make it interesting for them. You know, you can't just say, oh, you don't really have to do anything.
Just nuke boss.
Yeah, well, the thing is that generally speaking, by making things that melee have to do, like in terms of movement and stuff like that, that is the thing that normally screws them because they're out of range of things. So you got to be like really careful about how you got to make melee do stuff, because if they have to move too much and be out of range of the boss, then you're just going to bring a ranged player instead. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a careful area, but I think they did pretty well this tier. Generally speaking as well, I generally did like Nighthold.
Yeah, I liked it as well. But I think going back to what we were talking about, people getting burnt out and stuff like that, it's very evident now. Nighthold as a whole, as an instance, I've enjoyed it. I'm satisfied with it. I'm happy with it. But again, going back to some of the bosses, I think Mythic could have been better. I think there are certain bosses where they just didn't feel like Mythic bosses, and instead they felt like Heroic plus bosses.
Yeah.
They were Heroic bosses that just were scaled up slightly. And I don't think that's always the best way of doing Mythic.
Yeah, it's not even to do with difficulty, once again, as we said before.
Yeah,
it's
it's
just normally there's a little bit of a spice, a little bit of a twist, and
Yeah.
at the moment it's just like, so especially with some of the earlier bosses where some of the cool twists can be seen by the most amount of people. That's where I think you should put the most cool shit, like on Kargath. That's where you put the tiger pits that instantly kill you, and you disengage into it, and everyone laughs at you, like it happened with me all the time. So that kind of shit. Or add more stuff like that where everyone can see all the cool bosses, rather than just maybe saving it for the later bosses where, you know, more of the
Less
crazy stuff will
people see
happen. Yeah, and less people see it. So either way, good instance. Happy with it generally, probably.
Yep. So we'll leave it there. It's been a pretty long episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Of course, as we said at the start of the video, Mythic Guides are going to start coming out, as well as all our coverage regarding the 7.2 PTR. So look out for that shit. Before we do go, I want to give a huge shout out to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are absolutely awesome. We'll be catching up with all of you soon. And we shall see you all in the next episode.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.